Hi, folks, and welcome to my newest episode. So I did want to say in advance, we are in the middle of a huge rainstorm that's been going for several days here in Northern California. Boy, we needed the weather. We needed that water and the rain very much, but it is wreaking havoc with the neighborhoods around here. So hopefully we won't hear too much of a distraction of huge amounts of rain beating up against the house or some crazy windstorm. I just wanted to say that just in case we have these moments where something really strange, you hear it in the background. Believe it or not, it's not a special effect. We're actually having one heck of a torrent here. Now, on with the show. Thank you for listening. It's the last gasp of 2022, just a few hours left, and many folks are taking down their Christmas decorations and they're boxing them and tagging them and sliding them into a dark attic, which is the decoration equivalent of a cadaver in a morgue cold locker. The week between Christmas and New Year is like a postmortem of the holiday season recently departed. For some, the holiday died happily in its bed, surrounded by loved ones. And for others, the holiday overdosed in the middle of a wild orgy and was left behind a dumpster. Now, I'm in the mood to call a time of death for more than just 2022 and the holiday season. I'm in the mood to finally pull the life support system on a controversial idea that's long worn out its welcome and its effectiveness. And that idea is the alleged war on Christmas. I think that scare tactic has been pushing up daisies for a while now, but it has been propped up like Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's. It's used as an annual clickbait for the season, turning society's recognition that there's more than one religious choice into some kind of a conspiracy. If there ever was a war on Christmas, it was lost without one bullet being fired, or won without one bullet being fired, whichever way you want to lean on this. There was no 38th parallel, nor no man's land to defend or take. Hell, most of the combatants didn't even know they were in a war. Honestly, the word war sounds like misleading advertising. Instead of a war, it feels more like the hostile corporate takeover of a company with an inept CEO and officers. Let's call it a rebranding, shall we? The new owners will use this rebranding to repair the damage caused by the parent's company, and it's no, we're going to do that again. Let's call it a rebranding, shall we? The new owners will rebrand. They'll use that to repair the damage caused by the parent company's consistently terrible management style. I mean, let's face it, the holiday itself is already pretty well versed in rebranding. Christmas is a rebranding of the Roman holiday Saturnalia and the Norse holiday of Yule. And it's not like Christmas has always been celebrated as a revered holiday in America or in England. In fact, the only time Christmas was successfully and officially banned was by the Puritans, the Protestant Christians, from 1659 to 1681. They believed it was an insult to God to celebrate a day that was associated with paganism, which was December 25th. Although that ban didn't last long, the opinion of the holiday didn't rise much, and Christmas didn't become a legal holiday in the U.S. until 1856. In fact, some Boston schools held classes on December 25th until 1870. Talk about a short recess. Christmas was considered a minor holiday in Victorian England. How marginalized was Christmas at that time? It was the second most popular winter celebration after Boxing Day. Now, I bring all this up not only to show that the modern ideal of Christmas celebration is newer than most folks think, but also it has always been altered and defined by public opinion and the culture's willingness to accept it. Personally, if there ever was a war, I think it ended in 1997. Why is that, you may ask? Well, that year, TBS and hundreds... Why, you may ask? Well, that year, TBS and hundreds of other cable affiliate stations switched from showing its... Pause. Now, why is that, you may ask? Well, that year, TBS and hundreds of cable affiliate stations switched from showing It's a Wonderful Life 24 hours a day to A Christmas Story. It wasn't a premeditated act. It was a fiscal decision because NBC bought the rights to It's a Wonderful Life so they could broadcast it exclusively. And ever since 1997, TBS airs A Christmas Story 12 times over 24 hours, from Christmas Eve to the evening on Christmas Day. Now, why do I think this is significant? Well, because sometimes something as small as this can unconsciously capture a change in the culture. Now, It's a Wonderful Life is a beautiful film with a beautiful message. The message is, remember, no man is a failure who has friends. Now, the thing about that message is that it is literally inscribed in a Bible by an angel at the end of the movie. And this is a movie that uses the framework of guardian angels, the power of prayer, and a Christmas miracle to tell a very human story of love and family. Comparatively, A Christmas Story has a beautiful message that says, in the end, nothing matters as much as family and the memories that they make. The movie tells the story with an unvarnished but sentimental eye to the on-screen family. No matter how grumpy and pig-headed the old man is, or how much the brothers pick on each other, it's clear this family is full of love. But when it comes to looking at the holiday season itself, the movie is ruthlessly unsentimental. From bad neighbors to school bullies to overworked department store Santas and elves to little orphan Annie, the outside forces pummel this family with obstacles and bitter disappointment. The movie takes aim at the relentlessness of consumer culture. We're going to do that again. The movie takes aim at the relentlessness of consumer culture. There is a gorgeous department store window full of toys. There is dad haggling for a Christmas tree, and there's a major award won from a contest. What there isn't in the movie is a church scene. They don't pray at dinner. There's no manger scene at City Hall. And there's no mention of Jesus, although the Wizard of Oz is represented. It is a decidedly secular Christmas story, where consumerism is a two-edged sword and the family relies only on itself for happy endings. Now, why weren't there protests 25 years ago when a movie with strong religious underpinnings was replaced with secular holidays? Now, why weren't there protests 25 years ago when a movie with strong religious underpinnings was replaced with a secular story? Or why haven't there been annual boycotts for the last 25 years? Well, I think most folks would say that A Christmas Story has the best parts of the spirit of the holidays, love and family, and that's what matters. I think the unilateral acceptance of A Christmas Story shows that most of us are happily cultivating our own personal reasons for the season. And I think that folks are tired of declarations that amount to nothing but noise. Case in point, in Tim Allen's new film, The Santa Clauses, Santa says saying Merry Christmas to all has suddenly become problematic. That comment got jeered by the expected sources, of course, but it wasn't just the Hollywood elite talking to Twitter to push back on that line. Would you believe it pissed off professional department store Santas? As a professional Santa, I know that's bull, said @DannyDangerOz. The biggest problem is right-wing pundits claiming things like Merry Christmas, decorations, and songs are being banned. I spend a chunk of my time as Santa calming down old folks who believe Christmas is being taken from them. It's cruel. The end result of all this war on Christmas rhetoric is, I believe, a total backfire, the opposite effect than what was expected. After decades of saber-rattling, the most common debate around the holiday now is whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. These annual diatribes also embolden horror filmmakers. I'm going to do that again. These annual diatribes also emboldened horror filmmakers who are willing to call the bluff and double down on the moral outrage. In the past few years, holiday horror films and horror comedies have inundated the streaming services. And this year, some of them have been quite audacious and original and absurd in their fun. Take the new Norwegian film, Troll, that premiered on Netflix just in time for the holiday season. The movie deals with ancient folklore from the land that is considered one of the original birthplaces of Santa Claus. Norwegians celebrated their version of Christmas long before the birth of Christ, and it included a supernatural being called the Nisa. Now, the Nisa were short-bearded humanoids who were originally guardians of farms, and then they became synonymous with the winter solstice. When Christianity came along, Nisa was lumped in with other supernatural beings like trolls as false pagan idols. Norwegian lore said that Santa was born underground in an Oslo fjord, very much like the trolls that lived inside mountains. Now, the story of Troll, the movie, opens at a controversial mining operation in the Dovre Mountains, where workers dig a huge tunnel for a railroad. Protesters line the edges of this mining operation, recording everything with their phones. When the miners set off a charge deep in the tunnel, there seems to be an aftershock, and the miners suddenly panic and scramble as the cave starts to crumble. It rumbles. The interior starts to fall apart. It starts to crumble. Or is it crumbling? Or is it that the cave walls themselves begin to move? In an instant, the mining team is lost, buried as the cave seems to explode outward. Was that the deafening roar of tons of stone collapsing all at once? Or was that the growl of something else? As the government tries to understand what happened to cause this industrial disaster, footage from protesters starts to go viral online. Not only does this footage record this unholy growl that was heard long after the explosion happens, it also shows a strange pattern to the debris that resembles a shadow of something huge, like a giant rising from the ground. While the government experts argue over what they might see in this footage, they receive bizarre aerial footage from reconnaissance jets. It seems to show a strange pattern of huge craters in the ground in the countryside. Huge craters that are all the same size and same depth, and they are equally spaced apart, like giant footprints. Geologists and archaeologists and biologists are called as experts to tell the government leaders what is causing this strange event. Are these sinkholes caused by global warming? Is it a terrorist attack of some sort? Or are they meteor strikes? The disturbing realization is that these meteor strikes, wherever they are, form a straight line across the country. A straight line that is heading directly for the city of Oslo. Now, Troll is a movie that owes a lot to the monster movies of the 50s and the 60s, especially the original Godzilla from 1954. There are a lot of similarities to Godzilla in this movie, including shots that are direct lifts, homages to the Toho giant himself. But there are a lot of similarities to Godzilla, including shots that are direct homages to the Toho giant. But the homages are only part of the similarities. Like the original Godzilla, Troll is a monster movie as social reckoning, Like the original Godzilla, Troll is a monster movie as social reckoning, where, in this instance, Oslo gets stomped on to make a point instead of Tokyo. Folks forget that Godzilla came out less than a decade after the USA dropped nuclear bombs on Japanese cities, or that General MacArthur occupied Japan at the time and the US government was still doing secret bomb tests off the Bikini Atoll. The Japanese press was censored from discussing anything about the bombings, but a little monster movie with a giant nuclear lizard could say a lot with just a little subtext. And Troll does the same thing, commenting on the environmental destruction that mining in the Arctic Circle is creating. But what I found impressive, and quite brazen, was its flagrant calling out of how colonialism and Christianity forcibly changed Norway's culture, and that how that colonialist attitude changed the relationship to the land people had, from being stewards and a partnership with the land to privileged greed. Using a giant troll coming out of a mountainside, the movie can comment on the church and government plundering riches and land from the people itself. The movie blatantly discusses the areas where the church appropriated pagan beliefs and folklore, and how this giant has come to settle the score. And the movie has a great sense of humor. And most of all, it is a cool monster movie that is a ton of fun for any monster lover, and I am one of those. You know, there used to be a time when having a killer Santa in your movie would spark national protests and get your movie pulled from theaters. But it's been nearly 40 years since Silent Night, Deadly Night, and times have certainly changed. Although that movie had 4 sequels, and there were a few copycat Killer Santa movies around that time, it was a subgenre that fell into obscurity. However, over the last decade, there are more Killer Santas in movies than there are drunk Santas in San Francisco's annual SantaCon, and that is a lot of Santas. Now, I've not been a big fan of these movies, as they've always seemed like one-trick ponies to me, because the first time you see Santa with an axe or a knife trying to kill somebody, it's transgressive, but after that, it's kind of derivative. But as the number of Killer Santa movies kept growing, I started to look at them a little differently. See, Santa is a cultural icon, but he's also a folk hero. He is part of folklore. And folklore is an art form that is passed on through different storytellers, and it also follows cultural changes with each generation. In other words, the stories adapt to what the ideas of each generation are about what a hero and an anti-hero are. I started to look at Santa Claus the same way I look at another icon of folklore, Stagger Lee. There are over 400 versions of the murder ballad of Stagger Lee, and what's interesting is seeing how that character changes over time. In the earliest versions of that song, which is based on a true crime, by the way, Stagger Lee is the villain who gets brought to justice. However, as time goes on and our culture shifts, Stagger Lee becomes an anti-hero, a cult figure, and a dark folk hero. In the same way, Killer Santas change from a serial killer who wears the suit he took off of a dead guy to a psycho who thinks he really is Santa, to Santa Claus as a supernatural entity that kills the wicked. This folk hero changes with the times that his story gets told. I think horror always tells us the ugly truth about ourselves. It pokes the source. I think that horror always tells us the ugly truth about ourselves. It pokes at the sore spot we don't want to acknowledge. I'm going to pause. I don't think it's a coincidence that the wholesome image of Santa Claus gets soiled during the 1980s. This is at the same time that the religious right gains political power and the moral majority starts to impose their flavor of decency on the culture. Sure, Killer Santa was a shock tactic, but it also sensed something was not right at the center of this institution, consciously or unconsciously. So now, let's cut to 2022, shall we? Where there were no less than 3 Killer Santa movies in the theaters, and there were many more micro-budget ones on Tubi. There was Joe Bago's Christmas Bloody Christmas, which was The Terminator as a Killer Santa movie. The story of military robots being repurposed as department store Santas is absurd. But the movie scores points for not backing down on the gory carnage. Then there was The Mean One, which was a horror riffing on the Grinch Who Stole Christmas without actually saying the Grinch. In this movie, an unnamed green monster in a Santa suit attacks Cindy Who's family home. Mom is killed, but Cindy survives. But 20 years later, the Mean One returns for her. Mom is killed, but Cindy survives. But 20 years later, the Mean One returns for her. The movie had the tagline, "First he stole Christmas, now he's out for blood." And then there was Violent Night, which removes the debate on whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie by being the Die Hard of Christmas movies. The movie opens on familiar turf. Santa is drunk at a bar complaining to another Kris Kringle about how greedy kids are these days. On the transgression scale, it's a 20-year-old gag around bad Santa time. Except that we find out that he's the real Santa, a magical god that doesn't understand the Christmas magic he has flowing in his veins. He seems doomed to his fate, equally cursed and compelled to visit all the children in the world to bear the gifts they deserve, good or bad. This Christmas Eve, Santa runs into a snag as he delivers gifts to the estate of an ultra-wealthy family. Armed mercenaries lay siege to the estate and take hostages so they can steal $300 million from the family safe. Unfortunately for Santa, one of the hostages is a little girl on his good list, and he cannot leave her behind. Die Hard with candy canes, right? Except that Violent Night is so over-the-top violent, it goes from action film to horror comedy. Here's a case in point. Santa fights a mercenary in a vicious hand-to-hand combat. Now, in an action film, you might see Santa grab a Christmas tree top or star and jam it into the guy's eye, and that is what happens here. However, in Violent Night, the guy doesn't stop. He keeps coming with this star sticking out of his eye socket. So what does Santa do? Santa plugs the star into the wall and electrocutes the guy. But wait, that's not all. The guy falls to the ground, scrambles around, vibrates, dies, laying right next to... But wait, that's not all. The guy wriggles to the ground. He's trembling while the electricity goes through him. Nope. But wait, that's not all. The guy not only falls to the ground electrocuted, he lays there and his face catches fire while Santa sits there next to this little human bonfire while he bleeds from his own wounds. And that's one of Santa's first kills. The violence escalates from there. And this is the interesting thing about this story. We have this change from the killer Santa template to a folk hero, kind of like Stagger Lee. We find out that Santa used to be a human, a vicious and evil Viking killer who somehow went from being mortal to a supernatural being. When Santa takes off his shirt to clean his wounds, we see that he is covered with pagan, Norse, and Viking tattoos of runes and symbols. It reminded me of Kevin Hearn's Iron Druid character from his book series, where the main character's tattoos are living spells that keep him alive for centuries, which is another subversion of the Christian concept of Santa Claus as St. Nicholas. Like Troll, Violent Night offers a far more ancient version of a traditional Christian icon, reinventing the rules. Is he cursed to live forever? Or until he atones for his crimes? We don't know. And does it really matter in this movie? It must be said that there is a hint of Christianity in this film because there is a nativity scene set up in the yard of the estate. However, one of the characters uses the plaster baby Jesus to bash in a mercenary's head. The violence in this movie is gory and over the top, yet we laugh right after we groan at the sight of it all. If there's a category for good-natured gore, this film epitomizes it. This new version of the Stagger Lee Santa Claus is someone who kills with impunity, but we cheer him on as a folk hero for our time. After all this carnage, After all this carnage, you might want to sit peacefully and relax in front of the fireplace, one of the most ancient traditions we have. Nobody knows the exact origin of the Yule log, although it is most likely from Germanic pagan customs. The lighting of the Yule log was used to symbolize the birth of Jesus by some, while others claimed it symbolized Jesus' triumph over sin. However, these days, there's a modern technological tradition, which is the video fireplace, or the video Yule log. And you know what? This tradition is older than you think it is. The first televising of a video of a log burning in a fireplace was on WPIX-TV in New York City on Christmas Eve in 1966. This eccentric idea has since become an innocuous staple in households, background filler, just like radio station music. And there have been parody versions of it, such as looping Anakin Skywalker's funeral pyre from Return of the Jedi. But pretty much the video Yule log is the less annoying cousin to the ugly Christmas sweater. That is, until this year. This was the year of Adult Swim's Yule Log, which is one of the most unhinged and most disruptive holiday treats since tuna fish Jell-O. When you decide to watch this, and I think you really should, you'll want to curse me at first, because this thing starts out being a traditional video Yule Log recording. For a few minutes, it just goes on with the logs burning, which I think is such a punk rock touch. Because then, as time goes on, we hear someone off camera milling about and talking to someone on their phone. We see a woman in a dress with a vacuum cleaner walk in front of the fireplace in front of the camera, and then she starts cleaning the carpet. The angle doesn't change. She walks out of the frame, continuing to clean and vacuum. And then there's a knock on the door. Now, I really don't want to say much more here because the element of surprise is Now, I really don't want to say much here. Nope. Now, I really don't want to say much more because the element of surprise is what makes this such absurd fun. Even saying that sets up too many expectations, I think. Adult Swim's Yule Log is one of those experiences that is fun to watch, but what you really want to do is prank someone else with it. Have it playing in the background, unannounced, while the family and friends play board games or smoke a bowl. Let it start, camouflaged in bland normalcy for the first few minutes, just playing in the background like white noise. And then watch everyone in the room slowly try to understand what they're watching and figure out whether or not they're hallucinating. But they won't be hallucinating. They will just be under the spell of the Yule Log. Now, I want to end this conversation on a positive note as we enter 2023. I'll take my cue from Joe Bob Briggs, from a monologue he delivered on his Goldtide Get-Together Drive-In special. He mentioned that the message he always felt was important about the story of baby Jesus was that of welcoming the stranger. The story is full of strangers. The shepherds are strangers. The wise men are strangers. And Mary and Joseph are strangers. Yet they take each other at face value, and they find comfort together for a night, which is the only currency that they have. We are all strangers in this crazy world, and I hope that in the upcoming year, we can find a way to comfort each other, even just for a night. I thank you for letting me entertain you for another year. Happy New Year's.